So Ground Zero as an album actually takes off after a place where we haven't had much between the last album in 2013. The whole concept is that metaphorically, you've already been on a rescue ship, and that rescue ship has crashed onto an island. It's about two people, person one being myself, person two being my best friend. I'm crashing onto this island as I've made that crash already and he's just about to, but it's a bit more metaphorical and it applies to a lot more things on a lot more levels. Pressure. Pressure takes up right after I've crashed on the island. Person two is just about to crash on the island, and there's a high feedback frequency of your ears ringing just after the explosion of the crash. And this track is actually very prophetic in nature. It has the main substance of resolve for every other track in the album lyrically in there, but it's so in the background, it's not very forward yet, it's not very comparable yet, but it's all there. It's all fading in and out, like prophetically over what the rest of the track is about to come. And you have this unstable bass that really just gives you that unstableness in the low end, and that you really don't know where you are and where you're trying to grasp. And then right at the end, all of the voices fade out to one moment of clarity before the events of the album actually pick up. Rebuild. This is simply both perspectives of the crash, from myself who's just crashed and person two who's actually just coming up on the crash and can't really see any way to stop it from happening, but processing what's bringing us to that point. And about halfway through, you have the intro theme brought back in its fullness, in its completion, with a solid low end that's not unstable anymore, and with clear lyrics that are up to the front about it, and the resolve of both people outrooting the lies and destruction that brings them to the crash at this point. So Break Me is a track that's actually an anthem of recovery in a sense. This is after the crash and after we started to rebuild, that we rebuild on solid ground, and that the fact is that when the storms come, because they will come regardless, but if you've built on solid ground as we have this time, like, you can't break me is one of the main lyrics and main functions of that piece right there, so that you can't break me when we've built on solid ground like that. And then the lyrics that come up later, like every word you say bleeds from the heart, is recognizing that person one who's reaching out to person two at this point to like rebuild and rebuild properly from the foundation up, that person one is really meaning it and really means to help and really intends to help well. Though we've been weeding through all these lies and deception at this point, you can actually see the truth, that your heart is exposed, that you mean it. But on the other hand, person two also sees that as your heart is exposed, you can kind of see that as a weakness too, and it's the struggle between trying to trust to rebuild and being in the enemy's face, being like, you can't break me, when the actuality is person one can't be broken, but person two isn't so sure about it. Broken Pieces. This song is actually more about the state of the island that we crash onto. The island being the culture or the world that it's actually in, wherever that is, that applies to a lot of things. But simply just going to this island and going to the people on this island where I've chosen to rebuild, and the main lyric in that is that hope is a choice. Despite what we have around us, that hope is a choice that we have to actually bring up and have hope. And just bringing that to these people who are down in despair on this island, in this world or culture, whatever it is, and they're not choosing to hope and they have nothing to hope for, and so their lives are in a perpetual spiral downwards. There's one section in there that has essentially a radio effect over it, that's just preaching the gospel and a testimony of hope to these people. And I find that interesting. I added that kind of because my dad actually, his entire job, he's dedicated his life to building radio stations to essentially do that same thing to many other islands. And so that is kind of that effect of the radio effect for the voice, saying like, hey, there's hope, you just have to choose to hope because you can get there. And it's more about a tug of war of the state of the island, of people not choosing to hope and people who have hope trying to pass it on. Won't Give Up is a crazy song, but it really revolves around the fact that we finally have a rescue boat coming in to bring us out. And I start by going out and getting into person two's boat before they crash and help them try and steer it and turn it around. And then we get picked up by this other rescue ship that comes by. But I can get in the rescue ship just fine because I intend to be rescued. And person two is a bit reluctant because just as the start of the album, our rescue boat crashed before, and that's why we ended up back on that island where we were talking about. And so that's the struggle essentially of being able to trust the rescue ship, that they have good intentions to actually bring us out of that and to rescue it and to work on ourselves. And it's also the struggle of myself trying to help others while I'm trying to help myself too, because I'm still recovering from a crash myself as well. And then in the end of that there's a section right before the outro that drops down to a really simple amount of instruments, and that is where we realize that this rescue boat that just picked us up is also starting to go down, and we come to this decision point of what do we do. And just the outro is more like speaking to person two, like, don't stay and go down with the ship, because now we know that this is going down, it's not gonna keep going. And then don't just jump off the edge and try and swim out to shore or anything like that, because you're trying to jump off alone, do it on your own strength, and there's no tools or resources for you, and there's no hope when you jump off in that fashion. I'm over by a lifeboat that I'm trying to pull down, and as the music from the outro fades away to just solo piano, that's my voice trying to give one last final ditch attempt to bring a voice of reason to guidance and direction to person two, as they just kind of make their own way, and they end up choosing the end to jump off the side of the boat into the water and make it on their own strength, and I choose the lifeboat, which gives me a source of flotation for it. There's a couple of lyrics in that one, like keep me up till 6 a.m., because most of the album is actually processed in this concept here, or the lyrics in this song, because person 1 and 2 used to stay up till 6 a.m. talking about life, talking about these concepts, and that's where most of this flows out of. So as he goes off the other end, and his perspective that he has doing that, my perspective that I have going this way, and just brings clarity to kind of both of those, but he dives off into the water not to be seen again, and I latch down on this lifeboat and kind of set off while rescue ship sinks again. Perspectives as a song picks up right after Won't Give Up, where the lifeboat that I'm on gets washed ashore back to the same island that we started from, that we crashed into at the beginning. And it's taking everything that we've got back to these people and having that shift in perspectives from I'm at the end of myself and looking at a rescue from human perspectives and things that can fail you and looking for rescuing that, but actually shifting that perspective to a rescue from Jesus, who paid for it all in one go. And one of the lyrics there says that everything was paid for by one man, and that's Jesus. And so it goes back to the island, bringing back that hope with one last hurrah of freedom, setting everyone on the island free before I actually go out and look for a true rescue myself, setting back off into sea with oars that they've given me from the island to actually direct my path going forward. Grace and Rescue is a song originally was actually supposed to be for a movie trailer, never actually got used, but it's a song that really just doesn't have words to it, doesn't have lyrics to it, kind of on purpose, because it's more about emotional processing, everything that's happened before, and bringing that hope back to a center focus point, and like myself. It's a solo acoustic guitar, because in that sense it's just myself. There's no more boats, there's no more anything else, I'm just alone in the water adrift. So that's what that solo acoustic guitar represents. And then there's a harmony on top of that that comes about halfway through the song that just kind of brings a peaceful resolve to everything that's been processed as we move on. Sincerely, since the first album, has actually just been a cry out to God, saying like, hey, I'm at the end of myself. If I'm going to go any further, if anything's going to happen, I need you here to rejuvenate me and to guide my steps and everything. And so, just in the same as the last track, Grace and Rescue, it's a solo acoustic guitar, because at this point, it's like I'm alone adrift at sea. But Sincerely is more like my internal cry out to God, to be like, all these things have happened, I'm at the end of myself, I need you to just send help, to send peace. And then there's a pad in the background that actually represents more of the Holy Spirit encompassing or coming around, like surrounding me as we go off into the next adventure, as we just keep on drifting out to sea, not knowing where I'm going, but knowing that I have to keep going. Grand Soul is the last track on the album. This one was actually one take at a piano, just sitting down and basically processing through all the things that had happened during the album, things that made me write the rest of the album, processing it through and writing that through on one track. And about 3:45 the album in the end is where everything kind of thins out a bit and brings to a resolve of everything in the past, because what's the past just helps you grow stronger to move on, knowing that there's hope and that Jesus is guiding my steps and directions, and that there is hope moving forward, and you have to keep that in mind. And that outro just kind of resembles that when it gets to that point.